Velveeta. Da, 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 da.
You're so extra.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Jasmine, and in today's video, I will be showing you a bomb ass mac and cheese recipe. Oh my god, I know you see that. I know you see that goodness. If you want to see how to make this, stay tuned to the video, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe. So these are all of the ingredients you will need for this recipe. Very budget friendly. The first thing you need is 2 cans of evaporated milk. Doesn't have to be this brand, but I prefer this for this recipe. You will also need 3 bags of mild cheddar and low moisture mozzarella. Make sure it's low moisture. You will also need a block of Velveeta cheese, and you would need a stick of butter. And here are the seasonings you will need. I love chicken seasoning. I add this to almost everything. You need basil, paprika, oregano, garlic powder, and what's back here? Let's see, you got your onion powder, your parsley flakes, and your ground black pepper, and sazonado Goya Todo. Now I'm going to bring the water to boil for the pasta. I highly recommend you using a double chamber pot for this recipe, only because if you use a single chamber pot, there's a chance it might stick to the bottom, or it's not cooked all the way, or it's overcooked. So I highly recommend using this pot. So I'm adding all of my herb ingredients first: oregano, basil, and parsley. And then I am going to add the chicken seasoning. I don't have an exact measurements for this. You kind of just want to eyeball it. It doesn't matter if you add more than I do or less than I do, just as long as the water has some type of flavor to it. So now I'm going to start the cheese. With the cheese sauce, you need a good roux. For roux, you need equal parts of butter and equal parts of flour. So I use 3 tablespoons of butter and let that melt in a saucepan. And then I'm going to gradually add the 3 tablespoons of the flour. That way when you mix it, there's no chance of burning, no chance of clumpiness. This allows you to mix the ingredients very well and thoroughly. If you add it all together, it's just gonna make it harder for you. So now I'm adding the 2nd tablespoon of flour, and again, I'm just mixing that in. I have the heat on low, not low medium. You want to keep this on low for this part. The key to a great cheese sauce recipe is a good roux, so you really don't want to mess this part up. It doesn't seem like much, but this really adds to the texture of the cheese sauce. And you just want to make sure you mix that all in very well. Again, low heat. And this is what it should look like, more or less. Doesn't look like much, but again, it helps a lot. You will see the end result and see why this is essential. So now I'm going to add in the carnation milk. Just like the roux, I am going to gradually add this in, just so I know that everything is mixed together and I don't make a mess, even though you see that there's some milk already spilled on the stove, but you know, that's fine. Mind your business. And again, the heat is on low. You could turn it up to about 3, but I wouldn't go higher than 4. After you add the 2 cans of carnation milk, you want to add in the paprika. I love paprika. Paprika is my favorite seasoning. A lot of people don't care for it because they think that it doesn't do much for flavor wise, but in my opinion, it enhances all of the other seasoning in whatever you put it in. And not only that, I'm using paprika so it could get that yellow cheese look to it. You could use a red dye, but I just prefer paprika. You want to make sure that you mix it in very well. It's kind of like mixing in chocolate powder mix into cold milk. It doesn't dissolve right away. So you just have to take your time with that. And again, like just like the carnation milk and just like the roux, you want to gradually add it in. I would say this was somewhere between 1 to 1.5 tablespoons of paprika. And then you might get the clumps, but all you have to do is just keep on scrambling it like it's some eggs. And that's all you need to do. You only need half the block of the Velveeta cheese. You don't want to add the whole thing because it's going to be too cheesy. And you want to make sure you cut it up into little squares. You could cut it up smaller than this, or you could grate it. I personally don't like grating Velveeta cheese because it's too creamy and it just causes a mess. So I just prefer to chop it up in little pieces and just let it mix in. I don't add it all at once. I'll add about 3 to 4 pieces until they melt, and then I'll continue adding the rest. But make sure you are continuously turning this. You do not want the bottom of the cheese sauce to burn, because then it's just going to throw the whole thing off and you would have to start over. And no one wants to do that. Who has money for that? So I just realized I forgot to show you guys 2 other ingredients, which was the macaroni noodles and the Parmesan. I did have a video of that, but I'm not sure what happened, so I'm sorry. But after the water comes to a boil, you want to add the noodles in and mix it well. You don't want to add any oil to this, because what the oil will do is prevent the cheese from penetrating the noodles, and it's just going to sit on top of it, and that's not what you want. The Velveeta cheese is nice and melted at this point. Again, the heat is at low, no more than 4, probably no less than 3, because you also don't want the cheese to get too cold and then it's hard to mix, which is what I struggled with. So now I'm going to add the seasonings. Right now I'm adding some of the garlic powder, and again, you just want pinches of each of them. You don't want to be too heavy with this or too light. Now I'm adding in the ground pepper. Again, 1 to 3 pinches of each seasoning. If you don't want to add seasoning to this sauce, you don't have to. I did make this recipe without it, and it still came out decent, but with these minor ingredients, it just brings it together, and it's, I can't even describe it. It's just so mouth-watering. My mouth is literally salivating right now. So after you mix in the garlic powder, the sazonado, and the onion powder, you want to start adding in your cheese. This is about a bag of the cheddar cheese. You wanted to add it gradually, but I didn't have an assistant recording this. I was holding the phone with one hand and then mixing with the other hand. So I added the whole bag before I picked up my phone. And yeah, it didn't come out bad because I made sure to stay next to the pan, and I would rotate it from the outer corners and then go into the middle to ensure that there's no part of the sauce that has been untouched, because what will happen is it'll stick to the bottom and then it would start to burn, and you really don't want that. Now this is about 1 to 2 handful of low moisture mozzarella cheese. It's important to get the low moisture mozzarella cheese because usually what happens if you don't, it'll get too greasy. So this is what the cheese is looking like so far. As you can see, it's very stretchy and stringy. I don't mind cheese like this. I would love it at this texture for fries or dipping in chicken wings, but for the mac and cheese, you do not want it like this, because what it will do is stick the noodles all together. What happened was I was mixing it on a very, very low heat, around 1 or 2. So again, you want to keep it in between 3 and 4 to get close to this texture. You can see the difference very clearly. It's not as stringy, it's not as stretchy. So after you drain out your macaroni noodles, you want to start to add the cheese while it's still warm, because you don't want it to cool down, because then if you start to mix it while it's cold, it will get mushy and sticky and it won't come out as good. So just trust me on that. I know you love that cheese. Wow. So after you added in your cheese to your noodles or pasta, you just want to evenly mix that in. Make sure there's no corner untouched. I prefer flipping the noodles on top of each other instead of mixing it like a bowl of cereal, or I don't know, that was a bad analogy. But then you want to add 3 layers of cheese. First layer mozzarella, second layer cheddar, and third layer mozzarella again. And just make sure it is completely covered with cheese. Now you want to cover it with aluminum foil and put it in your oven to bake at 350. I am using an oven roast, don't ask me why. My oven sucks basically. So you want the cheese to melt thoroughly. This is about 10 to 15 minutes at 350. And the reason why you want it to melt thoroughly is because when you add the Parmesan, you want it to slightly absorb it. So when you go to crisp it, it comes out kind of like a pizza. So this is what you don't want to happen. Listen to me. Do not walk away while your mac and cheese is on broil. After you put the Parmesan, you wanted to put it in the oven to broil at 420. I put it at 500 trying to rush, and that's what happened. Please learn from my mistake. I almost cried. But it wasn't that bad, because when you have it on broil, all it does is heat up the top, as you can see. The inside was still very creamy and still very tasty. But again, do not walk away from it. You guys know I was not about to upload this cooking tutorial with a burnt ass mac and cheese. So the next day, I remade the recipe. In this batch, it was more parsley than the last one, but it still ended up being bomb. My mom actually told me she thinks I perfected it this time. So yeah, same thing, same concept. So after you add the cheeses, you want to put it in the oven to broil at 420 for 5 to 10 minutes. Again, do not walk away from your mac and cheese. You don't want to make the same mistake like me. There you have it, guys. A perfect batch of baked mac and cheese. Oh my god, this came out so good. I'm so amazed. Just look at this. Look at this clip. Have you ever seen anything more beautiful? Wow. And again, broil at 420 for about 5 to 10 minutes and do not walk away like I did. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like it. Remember to share this with your friends, with your family. And now you are a mac and cheese expert. Love you guys.
Oops.
Can you stop it? I'm gonna potentially upload this on YouTube. Can you stop?